What stands out to you about this space here that we've visited today? It's a public housing estate. What really stands out to you?
That these are the sort of public assets that should be used to house women and their families, men and their families, and give them an opportunity. It just seems like the waiting list for public housing is almost 35,000. We're up towards 34,500, and it's growing by 100 people a month. It's not keeping pace. Our public housing stock is falling into disrepair, as you probably see from the pictures. And rather than keeping up with the numbers that are increasing, we're actually falling behind at quite a huge rate.
So the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, Article 25, says everybody's got a right to housing. And we know that there's growing numbers of people who are experiencing homelessness. But when we've gone around this estate here, half of the available apartments here have been boarded up. What are your thoughts about that?
So that treaty, the United Nations that you talked about, the fact that the majority of these bottom floor units are boarded up is just a sad indictment to human rights violation.
Yep.
That we allow things to fall into disrepair intentionally. We know that there's kids that are sleeping in cars with their mums. It's a human rights violation.
Yep.
That we allow things to fall into disrepair.
The space around this public housing estate is really pleasant, and there's, like we've got footage that we'll include in this clip that shows parks and community gardens, and people walking their dog along the creek and whatnot. And you can see the potential for this space being sort of grabbed by property development people. Well, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, the union's thoughts on this is that they're really uncomfortable how that can be potentially used by developers as an inducement, that this could be framed. This is quite a tranquil. We're in middle Australia, basically. This is quite a tranquil place. People, as you said, people walking their dogs. This could be sold to developers as somewhere that's ideal. It is ideal to bring up your family. We've got football, cricket pitches and soccer pitches around us. Beautiful trees. It's, as I said earlier, it's very tranquil. What the concern is that this becomes privatised, and rather than being capped at 25% of someone's income, it could be up to between 40 and 60.
Yeah.
And the mix. Look, the Community Housing Federation has. There's been something in the papers recently about it's the Huntington estate, where the houses were demolished in 2011. Now they've made a proposal to state government that if they're given the land, they for no cost will then develop it and erect new housing with a mix, which would be probably 70-30, 70 social housing and 30 private housing. The problem with social housing is that there's no concrete number. It's not capped at 25. It can change depending on who's managing the property. It could be the Community Housing Federation for 3 years, and it could be someone else once their contract has expired. So
there's no security.
That's right. The security of tenure, your security of tenancy is not guaranteed. Exactly, and that's a concern for anyone that's experiencing housing disadvantage right now. And as a homeless persons union, this is something that we're very concerned about, that people are going to be priced out of the market, not because the housing doesn't exist, but because the housing that did exist has been allowed to fall into disrepair, and so they're forced into sleep in their cars in car parks.
Do you think the fact that people who manage estates, public housing estates, allow them to fall into disrepair is a justification for not putting any money into them at all and just letting them then end up having to be demolished?
Look, it's not a justification. It's when a state or federal whoever's managing that particular property decides that they are not going to put that public housing isn't a priority anymore, that's when they fall into disrepair. Through their actions, through allowing something to fall into disrepair, it's not a justification. It's a ruse. It's a stalking horse. They're allowing something to fall into disrepair, and through their actions, they're saying that public housing isn't important to us. That people who are the 25,000 Victorians that don't have any housing, the 110,000 Australians that don't have housing, it's okay as far as they're concerned. That's what they're telling us by allowing public housing to fall into disrepair, and it's not a justification at all. We should be up in arms. This is housing that's being paid for by generations of taxpayers' money, by consolidated revenue. This should not be for developers. These are for the families of Victoria, Australia, refugees that come to this country, asylum seekers, and it should not be allowed to fall into the hands of anyone that wants to make a buck. It should be, as far as we're concerned, the Homeless Persons Union, this housing should be for people that have brothers and sisters in the community. We want them. Look how sunny this place is. Yeah, I mean, look at this place. This is where people should be living.